Yo, everybody. Welcome to Esoterica Livestream. I try to do these every month. It's just always so much fun to connect with you guys and hang out and talk about recent content, take some questions and things like that. Unfortunately, this live stream is not going to be terribly long. I only have about an hour, maybe an hour, and how carried away I get. But no, it's really just a pleasure. I was hanging out with some of the Patreon supporters of the channel earlier today for office hours. So if you don't know, we're running a seminar on Cornelius Agrippa that's apparently never going to end. And I'm really not kidding it. I've tried to map out how long this thing is going to take, and my goal was to be done with it by the high holidays, and that's just not going to happen. But it's going to go as long as it goes because that's the way education is. So at any rate, patrons of the channel, which again you can sign up for Patreon for less than $5 a month. It can be relatively inexpensive, I think, at least for first world folks. And one of the perks of being on Patreon is you get to hang out on office hours every Friday, and so we all get together, and it's sort of like a live stream, but everyone's on the chat, and we talk about all kinds of things. And again, it's one of those things where I was hanging out with folks this morning. It's about 12 of us or something, maybe a little more, and I'm just struck by the intellectual depth that so many people bring to the table who are supporters of the channel, but also just as much of that intellectual depth and intellectual like powerhouse of like the kind of folks that folks can bring to the table, but also the kindness and the sincerity and the care and a real sense of just like being in love with the material and also being kind to each other and having fun. It's just a real amazing community. I'm extremely lucky to have such an amazing community that supports this work. And at any rate, I was hanging out with folks this morning and just having a blast, and just some of the most thoughtful, smart folks. And I'm really thankful to get to hang out with them. But folks, welcome to a live stream. We're going to take some questions, and I always like to review a little bit of sort of what we've been working on the past couple of weeks, and it has been an exciting past few weeks. First and foremost, the Agrippa class has just been an absolute ball to be teaching. I've always wanted to do a deep dive into the philosophy of Cornelius Agrippa, and this is an opportunity that I've never had before because I've never had the support to do it. Never going to be able to teach a class like this at a university. Just not going to happen probably. And I now have support with Patreon folks, and I'm able to do what I care about, what I love. And I'm also able to do what you care about and love, because at some level, patron folks, they pick the Agrippa class. And it's really great to be able to do the class and also just to be able to do these really deep dives into the history of occult philosophy, which I think is interesting both in the history of philosophy more generally, but also in the history of magic. And I think it's equally interesting both for practitioners and for just academics to really get a grip on Agrippa and really situate him in the history of thought. So in so many ways, the class has been a lot of fun to teach. I suspect that we're realistically about halfway through. But again, I don't really know. And again, it takes as long as it takes. That's the great thing also about teaching your own class, is that at the end of the day, I don't get to determine how long it takes to do this. It's going to be driven by the data. It's going to be driven by the book. It's going to be driven by the ideas. And if the ideas take X amount of time to do the course, it's going to take that amount of time to do the course. And so I'll keep doing it until we're finished with it, which, it'll get done when it gets done. But anyway, the Agrippa course has been, in many ways, the sort of real shining thing that I've really enjoyed to do. Also had Miriam and Zovim on the channel just recently. Miriam's just an absolutely lovely person. Again, an amazing combination of just extremely thoughtful, extremely deep reading, and funny. Like, if wit is the measure of a person's an intellect at some level, she's also just like sharp and witty, and just like a joy to be around her. She's just a lovely person. So it was great to have her on. And also just anytime I can support a woman doing work like that, being a public intellectual in a Jewish context with Daf Yomi or in the occult world, I'm pretty stoked about doing that. And so that was a lot of fun to talk to Miriam and hang out and talk about Shadam, to talk about demons in the Talmud, which was just a blast to do. what else? We worked on the Trithemius's, the Antipalus Maleficiorum, his catalog of necromantic books. It's our best reference in many ways to sort of where black magic, necromancy, demonology was, and sort of the early part of the 16th century. And that text we looked at pretty in depth. I'm really pleased to announce, and probably folks may have heard this from Foolish Fish over with Denis, who, if you're not subscribed to Foolish Fish, you're really missing out on so much great stuff. Not least of which is his fantastic weekly kind of occult news roundup, which I really really love. But Denis announced today, and I behind the scenes, Dr. Skinner and I have been talking, and he's been rolling out his translation of the Antipalus Maleficiorum, and also, and even more monumentally, I would say, his translation of the first couple books of the Summa Sacra Magica, which is without any doubt the most important book of magic to survived from the Middle Ages, produced in the 14th century by the Catalan scholar Ganel. And so it is monumental book about magic. Like I said, probably the most important medieval book of magic produced, and Dr. Skinner is in the process of translating it. And yes, if you're curious, Dr. Skinner and I have been talking behind the scenes, and hopefully here in the next little while we're gonna bring Dr. Skinner on Esoterica. I have a deep respect for his work. I have a deep respect for him as a scholar. Um, he's obviously admired greatly in the practitioner community for very good reason, and so it'll be a real honor of mine to be able to hang out with Dr. Skinner. Dr. Skinner represents a generation of folks that make whatever I do possible. Whatever I do, it's thanks to people like Joseph Peterson and Dr. Stephen Skinner and Adam over at the Alchemy website. Those guys are just like heroes of mine. And so, real honor to be able to chat with them. Sometimes Joseph Peterson will leave a kind comment on a video, and I'm always just giddy to see, wow, Joseph Peterson is leaving kind comments on my YouTube channel. It just really makes me, again, you feel a lot of honor when the people that you honor show you some respect back, and that to me gives me an enormous sense of accomplishment, and just real pleasant to be able to get some kind words for those guys, and looking forward to Dr. Skinner um, to have him on and chat with him, and really give him the praise due to such a titanic figure in this field. We also talked about talismans. We did an interesting episode on Thabit Ibn Qura and his book on talismans. It's nice to be able to do something in between, right? I was able to look at the Greer Warnock translation, prepared by very skilled, very famous practitioners, but also the Gideon Bohawk and Burnell edition. That's also very serious scholars in terms of the literary content of that text. So it was a lot of fun to work on Thabit. Again, monumentally important book of magic, probably one of the most important books of magic in the Middle Ages. Hardly referenced these days, unfortunately, but if you're interested in talismans, that's going to be your go-to, and a fantastic book by Thabit. Also inspired me, along with this Brill sale, which is ending today, I think, or ending tomorrow. Brill's offering 50% off all of their books, so you can just go crazy and buy, a book, and still be hundreds of dollars in the hole somehow. But one of the things I did do is I did spend some money on some Brill books, and one of those is the last pagans of Iraq, and I'm going to be doing an episode on the Nabatean agriculture and the Sabaeans. So look for that sometime, maybe later this year. It's an episode I've always wanted to do, and the Nabatean agriculture is a fabulously interesting book that is not translated, but the closest thing we have is this fine study by my Finnish scholar, I believe. So what else have we been doing course-wise in terms of yes, I know the other big thing that we worked on, and this was the Demiurge. We got the second. I know many people have been asking about the second episode on the Demiurge. I finally got around to making a second episode on the Demiurge. I actually just sat down just a couple days ago with Connor over at Cosmic Skeptic, and we not Connor, But yeah, we sat down and did an interview with him on the Demiurge, and yes, there will be a third chapter to the Demiurge series. There'll be a third and final episode of the Demiurge series. I'm going to do a lot of speculative work, so that'll be an episode of Esoterica where I don't try to do a lot of speculation on this channel because it's not really about me and it's not really about what I believe. But this is a place where I really do believe that we're going to do some speculating, and I have some speculation about it. I think it's backed up by rigor. It's not just sort of irresponsible speculation. It is quite responsible speculation, I hope. But we'll be covering the Demiurge and texts like the Apocryphon of John and then the Valentinian tradition. But I'll also veer off and talk a little bit about the Demiurge in the Bogomil tradition, and also the Cosmocrator that shows up in the form of like the devil and some Cathar texts. So I will bring us in some sense into the Demiurge and post-Demiurge position as we do that. But of course, the other big news, the other huge news, really, it's a massive news, is that today I've just publicly announced the Egypt trip. I've been hinting at this and telegraphing about it and promising it. But finally, we have the itinerary done. We have all the logistics in a row. It is a massive, massive, massive undertaking, folks. Let me tell you, this Egypt trip is going to be just stunning. We are going to be doing the work of studying some of the most foundational texts in the history of esotericism in the very place in which they were composed. It is being able to be in the Pyramid of Unas, just us, right? Imagine it's the handful of us in the Pyramid of Unas, right? Inside of the most ancient religious text in history. And then we'll study the Corpus Hermeticum and the Conversations in the House of Life, the Book of Thoth. We'll be reading that in Hermopolis. We'll go into the tomb of one of the high priests of Thoth, one of the people that directly served this amazing deity in ancient Egypt, and we'll be looking directly at some of those texts in those places. We're going to have exclusive access to the Coptic Museum. That is to say, we will be in there by ourselves with the Nag Hammadi Library. Of course, you're not going to be able to get close to it because it's going to be behind glass or what have you. But there's something about the exclusivity of the trip that's going to be amazing. Of course, I'll be your esoteric leader. We'll also have Egyptologists on staff as we go to sites, because I'm not an Egyptologist, and so you'll have also Egyptologists as we travel to site. And we're going to be there for almost 2 weeks, folks. And we're going to be having daily seminars, reflections. We're going to be traveling, in many parts of the country. We're going to get down to Middle Egypt, to Hermopolis. We're going to get to Alexandria. We're going to, of course, see the Great Pyramid. We'll see the Sphinx. We'll see all the big stuff. We'll go to Saqqara and see the big pyramids there, the step pyramids. So it is going to be, I think, a trip for the ages. And I think what I can bring uniquely to a trip to Egypt, maybe not uniquely, but there are a few people in the world that can do it, and I think I'm one of them, is that we'll be coming to Egypt not just as tourists to study Egypt in sort of the pharaonic Egypt, but really studying Egypt as the ground center for Western esotericism. Whether that's Pythagoras going to Egypt to learn, the things that he learned about the soul and geometry, or whether it's the homeland of Hermes Trismegistus, whether it is the homeland of Cleopatra the alchemist and Zosimus, where literally alchemy was born in Egypt. The Greek magical papyri, we'll be studying those while we're there as well. You'll get a textbook, right? There'll be a textbook where all these texts will be in the textbook, and we'll have it printed out for you. We're going to be studying esotericism in some sense where it began, at least Western esotericism. We're going to be studying it at the ground zero where it began. And we'll be studying all this amazing literature, from Philo of Alexandria to the Gnostic text, the Apocryphon of John and other Gnostic texts, the Gospel of Thomas. Many people have wondered why I don't have episodes in the Gospel of Thomas. Mostly because it's been done by other people, and I don't want to cover stuff that's been done by other people. But the Gospel of Thomas, Thunder Perfect Mind, look at the Nag Hammadi Library, Corpus Hermeticum. We'll look at Sefer HaRazim, the Book of Magic. We'll look at some Hechelet literature. People also forget Luria, Isaac Luria, the founder of Kabbalah as we know it. Lurianic Kabbalah. Luria is living in Egypt. all the way up until about 2 or 3 years before he ultimately immigrates to Meron and to Safed in the Ottoman Empire. And he's doing most of his Kabbalistic development in Egypt. And so in many ways, we think of Lurianic Kabbalah as being a Safedian thing, but it all gestated in Egypt. It all gestated in Egypt. And so it really is going to allow us to have a conversation around esotericism and the origins of esotericism in a way that I think that no other place on the earth, again, for Western esotericism, it's going to give us access to a place and put us into a place in which so much of this has happened in a way that no other place can do that kind of work. And yeah, I want you to come. I want you to come. You know, I think that I'd love to have um, as big as a group as we can get, with still maintaining a great deal of connection and a community and of relationship. So it's not going to be a huge group. I'm not going to. It's not going to work to have a huge group, but I think it'll be a tight, fantastic community of esoterica people who really want to get there on the ground and get into this material and experience these sites, you know, to see Hermopolis there, to see the tombs of these the high priests of Thoth and things like this. I think it'll be an absolutely mind-blowing experience, and I'm absolutely looking forward for doing that in February. And again, if you're interested in coming in the trip and the tour and the seminar, the technologies of ancient mystical ascent, make sure to check out this week's episode. It's sort of a preview for what we'll be doing, and you can find all the links in this week's episode for contacting Argos Destinations, who will be facilitating the trip and getting us over there, and not getting us over there, getting us inside the country and doing all the things and taking care of us. So yeah, and again, we'll have an open digital house, digital open house rather, in a couple weeks, less than a week, about 10 days. Where if you have any questions or concerns, we'll be fielding those questions. Everything from what we'll be studying to how do you get your visa. We'll be covering all of that material at an open house, and you can sign up again for that open house on the episode for this week. But absolutely, I hope folks can come join me in Egypt in February, and let's study together. Let's see these amazing sites together, and yeah, we'll build some esoterica community outside of the confines of a digital box. You'll get to be with me in person, and again, doing something that I think is in many ways rarely done in the history of Western esotericism. Really a trip to Egypt, directly inspired and directly informed by an education, a seminar in Western esotericism. So it is both something like a tour, but it's a tour fundamentally unwritten by education. And so I'm really looking forward to making it happen, and I hope you can come along. I'd love to have as many of you as we can, and what a fantastic place to meet and hang out for the first time. All right, folks, let me grab some questions. Let me make sure to get these super chats first, and then I'll jump back on to see what else we can get. Thank you, The Guardian. I love your channel. Thanks for sharing your studies with us. Also love the black metal merch. Appreciate that. I'm actually wearing some black metal merch. I'm actually wearing. I feel like I need to do a fit check, a la Dan McClellan. The fit for this live stream is Crawless. So listening to a lot of Crawless at the gym recently. And so yeah, thank you. I feel like it's somehow the appropriate music genre for this channel. It's funny, like I'm listening to like Arcangelo Corelli and a bunch of Baroque music, and then it's like aside from that, always listening to some black metal. Thank you for the super sticker, Liesel. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. But yeah, what else I've been listening to? I've been listening to a lot of chiptune recently. A lot of chiptune. I don't know. I've gotten more interested in listening to like old school chiptune music. But let's see here. Let me grab these super chats and. All right. So, S. Mill, definitely a supporter of the channel. I appreciate it. When did Yotev of Hey first become recognized as omnipotent and omnibenevolent? Can the Tanakh references to it be considered hyperbole or real? He seems clueless, regretful, and was said to have even created evil and Tanakh. Yeah. So it seems like the omnis, when you get all the omnis, there are of course there are rhetorical elements of that in Tanakh, where God is in control of everything, and those most scholars recognize those, with the exception perhaps of the ones in Isaiah, that those are rhetoric. They're not actually representative of an actual theology. In fact, there's a great book called "Is There Theology in the Hebrew Bible?" which is a great question, just one should ask. But I don't think that you get the idea of philosophical omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omnipresence. You don't get that kind of thinking until someone like Philo, and maybe even into the first and second centuries of the Common Era. So the idea of a philosophically omnicated God, omnicated, why not? A God who's the God of the omnis, all powerful, all knowing, all present, all good, etc. That doesn't really get traction until the turn of the Common Era, first and second centuries. So that's a relatively new, a relatively recent concept. You don't really see that concept in the Hebrew Bible. In fact, Yahweh in many ways is limited to a geographical region in some ways. And there are other gods who are around that are limited to their geographical regions. And you do get again. You do get sometimes the rhetoric, that kind of omni rhetoric, but I think most scholars recognize that as a rhetoric, and not actually as a position, a theological position. So yeah, turn of the Common Era, first and second centuries. Are there any East Asian spell books like the Ars Notoria, the Lesser Key of Solomon, the DOP, De Magnum? There must be, and I'm sure there are. The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and also the answer is I don't know much or if anything about them. There is a YouTube channel, um, uh, who's hosted by an Asian woman, um, who Ben Bell. I'm not sure of her. Um, Hold on, I'll have to find it. But she does content on more East Asian esotericism, like I Ching and stuff like that. And I'm sure someone knows her name, and I'm sorry I don't know it, because I don't watch a lot of. You'd be surprised I don't watch much esotericism related content on on here. Hold on, I'm just checking to see if I can find her channel real fast, because she's definitely doing cool stuff. Um, yeah, here we go. Yeah, Benabo Wen, that's her name. I apologize for not knowing. Benabel Wen. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But she has a good channel, and again, I can't, I can't vouch for it because I don't know the material. So again, like I'm just saying, you know, uh, she's doing cool stuff. When I've watched some of her content, the content seems scholarly and rigorous, and she's clearly intelligent and doing cool work. And so that's the kind of stuff that looks like more Eastern esotericism. But but in terms of that content, I don't know. I'm just not an expert in that stuff by any stretch of the imagination. But I know she's making good content, and I've seen other people who I do trust vet it and say it's good. So take a look at that, and hopefully that will, that will do you justice. Is there any surviving Aramaic literature that you know that isn't explicitly Jewish or Christian? Also, thoughts on Brian Alt's upcoming Greek magical papyri anthology. It's still in the Kickstarter phase. Aramaic literature that isn't explicitly Jewish and Christian. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a bunch of literary texts in Aramaic. I would have to dig up, some of them, but yeah, we have a vast amount of literature, especially diplomatic literature written in Aramaic. So yeah, lots of folks wrote lots of stuff in Aramaic. It was the lingua franca of most of the ancient world. So yeah, we definitely have lots of literature written in lots of things written in Aramaic. But the Brian Alt's upcoming Greek magical papyri anthology. No, I don't know. I haven't seen this. I'm curious about it. There is a lot of work being done in the Greek magical papyri. Um, some of which, like Kirsten Switza's work, she's really going through and really systematically going through, really with an eye to the manuscripts. And Dr. Switza, who you can find on um, her channel is called Antiky Magic, I think. I can find it and put it in the chat. And she does really fantastic work on the Greek magical papyri and stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is that, we all rely on the old Betts edition, and the old Betts edition is just not reliable. It just totally needs to be gutted and redone. The Präsentanz that it relies on is also not reliable. So we need to start from scratch and not rely on the Betts, because it is just simply not reliable. And yeah, that's the long and short of it. So we need to be looking at the manuscripts and not going back to the Präsentanz and translating from that. There needs to be a whole new apparatus done, and some of that is being done. But I haven't checked out Brian Alt's upcoming book, so I don't know much about it. But I wish him the best. I'm always enthusiastic about people crowdfunding scholarship and trying to do the right thing. So that's great. But all right, let me get a couple more of these. In our last class, you mentioned that it would be helpful for practitioners to learn Hebrew. But yeah, I would say that that's the case. That traditionally, at least, Hebrew is thought of as an important sacred language in the magical tradition. Do I have any suggestions for learning Hebrew, medieval Hebrew? Yeah, I have. My suggestion is always to learning Hebrew is always to. This is what I'd recommend, folks. This is also true for learning Aramaic for folks who want to learn to read Aramaic. The way you do learning Hebrew is this: you take 2 semesters of classical Hebrew. That's going to get you 80% of your grammar and vocabulary. It's going to get you 80% of your grammar and vocabulary. You should do a 3rd semester translation work. I always say take a semester and translate the book of Ruth. Just translate the book of Ruth. Parse every single word of the book of Ruth until you know the ins and outs of the grammar of every single word in the book of Ruth. Simply parse and translate every word. That's 3 semesters of classical Hebrew. From there, what you would want to do is either go to an Aramaic grammar and begin picking up Aramaic, because almost all Aramaic grammars teach you Aramaic insofar as it differs from Hebrew, basically. And if you want to start learning to read rabbinical Hebrew, you just need to pick up a rabbinical Hebrew grammar. Most of the vocabulary is the same, with spelling differences mostly. And then once you picked up rabbinical Hebrew, all Hebrew is based on rabbinical Hebrew. This is the Hebrew of the Mishnah. So once you've learned to read the Hebrew of the Mishnah, you can read anything from the Middle Ages. Basically, you can learn to read anything from the Middle Ages. The one exception here is the Zohar, because the Zohar is written in a bizarre form of Aramaic that requires a bit more specialization. But sometimes the amount of specialization is sort of over emphasized. But that's what you want to do. So 2 semesters of college level Hebrew, 1 semester translation, then learn Mishnaic Hebrew, the Hebrew, what is called rabbinical Hebrew, and then you can begin to study text written in medieval Hebrew, because all medieval Hebrew is all based on, and modern Hebrew for that matter, is all based on rabbinical Hebrew. So that's what I would recommend that you do. If you want to teach yourself rabbinical Hebrew, or rather classical Hebrew, you should check out my reading list. It's in the pinned comment of all my videos. I have a list of all the books, many of the books I think you should get if you want to study Western esotericism. There's a specific section in there just for language learning, and I always recommend the Paige Kelly text for teaching yourself biblical Hebrew. He starts you off, as soon as you can read Hebrew letters, you're already reading stuff in the Bible. You're reading selections directly taken from the Bible. It's not just made up stuff. It's literally you're reading Hebrew from real text immediately. So I like Paige Kelly's Hebrew text. I do believe that Dan McClellan is also teaching a biblical Hebrew class, maybe in the fall or winter. I'm not sure when he's teaching it. Dan's is a good Hebraist, and so you can also take Dan McClellan's Hebrew class. I'm not sure when he's offering it. You may want to go check his website out, but I believe he's teaching an online Hebrew class, and that would be a great way to learn from and with other people. Dan was a translator with the LDS movement, and has a great grasp of classical Hebrew. So that's a long answer. That's a long answer. Have I ever seen Perry Megis's, but it's a Gnostic series? Very funny. I imagine he's watched you. If you have, I'm wondering what you think of his interpretation of Yaldabaoth Satan. I have not seen this. Maybe if you can put a if you can put a if you can put a link in the chat, I'll check it out later. And yeah, I love people are getting Miss Wynn, or she may be Dr. Wynn. I'm not sure her exact academic title, but yeah, thank you for folks for correcting me. Yeah, when I don't know something, I'm always happy to be corrected. And also, again, I really, glad to get her name out there a little bit. But no, I haven't seen that series. But if you can put maybe a link to the chat, I'd love to see it. If it's funny and Gnostic related, I'm about it. I'm about laughing with the Gnostics, laughing at the Gnostics. So I'd love to see it. All right, let me keep scrolling down here. Hi, Mike. It's the hardest working man watching Esoterica. You got the day off. Good for you, brother. I hope you're getting some decent weather over there on the East Coast. I know you're working hard doing the construction life, so I appreciate your super chats and your supporting the channel, especially on the Agrippa lectures. So hope you're taking the day off, man, and hope you have a good Labor Day. My father was a pipe fitter, and I worked with him for a bit, and I know what it is like to work construction, man. I know what it's like to work in the building trades. I know that is hard work, and let me just say, for all the working class people watching this, whether you're working in restaurants or working in construction or driving a bus or whatever it is that you do, just know that I come up from a working class background myself. I'm a first generation college student. And let me just say that I see the work you do, and I appreciate it, whether you're fixing transmissions or hanging black pipe or cutting grass, whatever it is. Your work, your labor is essential for the functioning of society. You deserve more respect than you get. You certainly deserve more pay and more days off than you get. And as one person from the working classes to another, let me wish you a very, very well-deserved Labor Day holiday. A while ago, Dan McClellan's like the MVP of this episode. Dan made a video where he mentioned that the New Testament is polytheistic, but didn't elaborate. Do you know what he's talking about? Have any book recommendations on the subject? I don't know. Maybe polytheistic in the sense that it's not totally clear that that Paul and maybe other people completely disbelieve in the existence of other gods, which is to say they believe that there are other gods, but perhaps they believe that they're demons. And so, and again, you have, polytheistic as a bit of a strange term. It depends on what you mean by a theos, what a god is. And so it could be the case that, someone like Paul did believe that, I don't know, that Jupiter was real, but that Jupiter was in fact not a god, but a kind of, not the god, but a kind of demon. And so I think that might be something along the lines of what he was thinking, but I don't want to speak for Dan. And I certainly didn't watch that episode, so I can't speak for Dan. But definitely it was a case that many early Christians did believe that Mars was real. They just thought that Mars was a demon. And so insofar as there are powerful, quasi-divine beings, that I think that does qualify as a kind of polytheism. But that all depends on what you mean by theos. What is a theos? And you can your tolerances for what is a god depends on how you define what a theos is. And if you define a theos as a singular, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present, of course you're not going to get other kind of entities. You're going to get all kinds of sub-entities. But in the ancient world, the theoi, the gods, were conceived very broadly, very, very broadly. They were not, we shouldn't think of this as sort of a philosophical 18th century conception of the way that we think about monotheism as it was conceived in the 18th century, but rather the lot more tolerances existed for what was considered a god. And therefore, insofar as that is true, then that might perhaps be the case. But again, I can't speak for Dr. McClellan and exactly what he was arguing. But if I had to divine what he might have been thinking, that's something like that. Schrodinger's cat. I hope that you are alive and not dead. Maybe by observing you now, you are alive. Do you think it will ever be possible for AI to accurately translate the thousands of ancient documents into modern English? Probably. Probably. I don't. Yeah, I don't doubt technology's ability. I mean, already, one of the really amazing things that's going on these days, in the background of what AI is doing, and folks may know this, AI has recognized, several, I forget how many, but many fragments of the Epic of Gilgamesh that previously had not been recognized. And so this is a case where AI is literally reading, or at least recognizing documents in I think Akkadian, and calling these to attentions of epigraphers, and we now have new chunks of the Epic of Gilgamesh that we did not know were even there, except for the fact that AI has alerted us to their existence. So I think that, to me, that bodes extremely well for the possibility that AI will that translation will be one of the first things on the chopping block when AI really does get up to speed. So yes, I'm very optimistic about the power of AI. Now, I think that there are places where AI is not going to be that successful, and that has to do with like human duplicity and human trickery when we write text, and this is especially true of esoteric texts. And so it may be the case that AI doesn't. It's going to be a little harder for AI to get those kind of nuances, but in terms of rendering grammatically one text, or syntactically and grammatically from one text from one language to another, I think AI is already doing that extremely well. I mean, you can ask the translation industry how well that's doing, and except for you can't, because the translation industry is basically out of business. And so I would say um, that this is I think it's coming, and I think it's gonna be great. Great. In Second Kings, the king of Moab sacrifices his son to repel an Israelite army. Yeah, he goes up on the battlements, and his son. He renders his son an olah. It looks like he burns his son, his first son. Is this a tacit admission by the biblical authors that one, other gods are real, and two, child sacrifice has real power? Yes and yes. In fact, next week's episode on Esoterica is going to be about Molech. And we're going to get into, is Molech a god? Is Molech a sacrifice? What is the Molech? What does it mean to say that you've done something la Molech? Yeah, we're going to be in the weeds about Molech, or Moloch, if you like the Vulgate Septuagint tradition of transliterating that. But yeah, I think yes and yes. I think that I think that absolutely the Israelites believe that Chemosh was real. That's the chief god of the Moabites, if I remember correctly. And two, not only they believe that child sacrifice had real power, they did it. There's overwhelming evidence, in my opinion, that the Israelites engaged in uh, several forms, at least three different forms of child sacrifice. The Molech sacrifice being one of them. And furthermore, if I think more, there may be even more. Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou also has argued that they had other forms of child sacrifice, including the Shaddai sacrifice, the sacrifice to Shaddai gods. So I'm not sure I follow Professor Stavrakopoulou on that, but yes, I do believe there were at least three forms of Israelite child sacrifice, and I definitely believe that they were efficacious. So look for next week's episode on Molech and the Molech sacrifice. We will be talking about it at length. So great question. Not just great, even a prophetic question, if you will. Yeah, thank you, Skittlechute. That's a great name. Thank you very much for your thanks, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And Chris, um, thank you for the super sticker. Thank you. Melissa, you're asking about Foolish Fish. This is the YouTube channel of Denis Poisson, hence the name Foolish Fish. Well, at least fish. But Denis has great book reviews and is a practitioner himself, and does what he calls Esoteric Saturdays, which are, I think, well received by practitioners. And yep, that's a fantastic YouTube channel, Foolish Fish. So absolutely look it up and tell Denis I send my best. I really love him. He's just a really kind, again, a very intelligent person who is also very kind and very humble, and not falsely humble, but who knows their path and sticks to it and does what they do, and they do it beautifully and do it well. And I've always had an absolute joy interacting with Denis. Just a good guy, a very menschlich dude. And so I'd recommend Denis absolutely, and really would recommend his channel. And like I said, send my thanks if you go over and subscribe. All right, folks, I'm trying to grab some other things about super chats. Oh, good. You finally like the episode on Yuki Mishima. Interesting dude, to say the least. Do you have any other recommendations of what to read from about Mishima? I would always say that if you're going to read after you read Sun and Steel, I would always recommend the sort of the big tetralogy that he wrote. If you want a short story, Patriotism is sort of the classic Mishima prophetic short story. It's also turned into a film that he made where he commits harakiri on film, and of course that's a bit dark foreshadowing for the end of his life. But Patriotism is a great short story, dripping with his Mishima's kind of reactionary romantic stuff, and people call it fascism, but I'm not sure. I think Mishima would have to believe in a lot more than just Mishima, which is what he primarily believed in, was himself. To be a fascist. I don't think he was a fascist. I think he was a romantic reactionary of a certain kind, a delusional reactionary, quite delusional, in fact. The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, I think, is my favorite novel of his. I would say that would be the one I would recommend, The Temple of the Golden Pavilion. Runaway Horses is good, but yeah, those are all great. All great. All right. Any thoughts on the construction of the third temple? Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to end the world, that's the way to do it. The Talmud says that the Messiah is not going to come, or the Messiah is going to come on two conditions. The first condition the Messiah will come is when the world is so good that it's fit for the Messiah, and when it's fit for the Messiah, the world, the Messiah will come when it's fit for the Messiah. The other thing is that the Messiah will come when the world is so terrible that only the Messiah can save it. If you want to create the world that's so terrible only the Messiah can save it, build the third temple, because that will ensure the end of the world. We will have bombed ourselves to oblivion, and that will be that. I hope, and it's not going to happen. I would love, I am the unusual progressive Jewish person in that I would love to see a restoration of the temple. I would love to see a functioning temple of some kind, but not at the price of ending the world. It's a great question from Ahmed regarding the Egypt plan. Yeah, any plans for roundtable discussions? Yes. Basically every day, aside from travel days, and maybe even travel days, if you want to, I'll bother you on the buses. But even every day that I can, there will be at least one seminar that I'll lead. There'll be discussion groups, and there will be roundtables, and there will be, bringing in, ideas from everybody. And so you should think of it, that the Egypt course or the Egypt trip, not just as a tourism thing, but you should really think about it. And I've geared the price, which if you want to get the price information, you got to email Aubrey and I'll put another link in the description of this video for the Egypt stuff. But I've really just thought of it as basically a seminar, that we'll be doing a seminar on the topic of ancient technologies and mystical ascent. And it's going to be a graduate level, seminar. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to come there with a graduate level understanding of this material, but it will be rigorous. We will be engaging in a rigorous study of this literature, the kind of thing you come to know and hopefully respect, the kind of work that I do. And I will be bringing that. And so in many ways, not only are we going to be kicking it with the Sphinx or whatever, but we're going to be doing real educational work. And so in one way of thinking about this trip is not only are you going on sort of a Egyptian vacation, I suppose, but you're also getting what will be the equivalent of, the better chunk of a semester seminar. in the foundations of Western esotericism. I mean, I could have even renamed this the foundations of Western esotericism, because we're going to be studying basically all of the foundational texts of ancient Western esotericism. So absolutely, absolutely, there's going to be roundtables, discussions. I mean, every trip, every time we get on a bus to go somewhere, it'll be a discussion group. It's going to be a nonstop nerd fest, punctuated by magnificent ancient ruins. So, so this will be kind of what it will look like. All right, there's some super chats down here. Following up, why do you think child sacrifice uniquely developed among the Canaanites when neighboring civilizations who practiced child sacrifice did not also practice child sacrifice? It didn't develop among the Canaanites. It seems like it's primarily a Punic, or rather Punic. It's a Phoenician practice. That is, say at least the Lamolek sacrifice was a Phoenician religious event that was imported by King Achaz. Now, the other forms of child sacrifice, I think child sacrifice was endemic in the ancient world. I think that it was very, very popular. This is one of the things that I think that many societies go through a period of time where child sacrifice is pretty popular. And that's just true in general. And that's just true in addition to infanticide, which was extremely common. And so I think infanticide was extremely common. Child sacrifice was extremely common. And I think that what ends up happening is a lot of civilizations end up ultimately abandoning it for various reasons. The Punic civilization being one of the rare examples that doesn't, or they do abandon it and they seem to go back to it, actually, is what happens, if we can trust the stelae there and the Carthaginian sites. And so I think that most of them do it, and then most of them do a really good job of trying to pretend like it never happened. And we see this process in the Hebrew Bible, where there's good evidence that the Israelites are engaging in child sacrifice, and then they go to great lengths to pretend like it never happened. I think the most famous example of this is maybe in Jeremiah, or I think it's in Jeremiah, where Yahweh says something to the equivalent of, not only did you guys do this, but I never even thought to ask you to do that. That's horrible. Why would you even imagine I would want something like that? When it's clear that at least some Yahwists believed that Yahweh had told them to give their firstborn son to Yahweh as a form of sacrifice. So yeah, I think it's not exceptional. I think that the Israelites are actually very normal in this regard. They just did a not so great job of covering their tracks. Thanks, Prince Eugen, for super sticker. I really appreciate that. Gothic Grace, would you ever consider creating a Discord server for your Patreon supporters? There is an unofficial Esoterica Patreon Discord. I'm not on it, frankly, mostly just because I don't have the capacity to be on it. And the reason why I would never start one is I would feel the need to moderate it, and I simply don't have that time. I simply do not have that time. If folks could see all the things that I'm doing in the background that's not, sort of making Esoterica videos that are related to Esoterica in some way, there's just no way I could moderate it. And if I can't moderate it, then I don't feel that I could trust me doing it. And so there is one. If you want to join our Patreon, there is an unofficial Discord, and I know that people hang out there and collaborate. But I think they share notes from the Agrippa class and other stuff. But at least officially, I'm not going to do one. At least not officially. Is demonical astrology of the Testament of Solomon a Judeo-Christian reaction to Egyptians saying that Yahweh was a malevolent deity? Yeah, something of a rivalry. I think that the demonic deacons of the Testament of Solomon are just because that's just like and again, I'm going to have to be careful here because I'm not an expert in astrology and I need to defer to someone like Chris Brennan. But I believe that what ends up happening, right, is that decanal astrology was indigenous to the Egyptians. That what happens is as Hellenistic astrology comes online, a lot of the astrological speculations coming from like Babylon and Persia, they get melded with the decanal system, and the decanal system all sort of gets jumbled together into one, broadly speaking, astrological system that we kind of recognize as Hellenistic astrology. I think that that just sticking the demons, the deacons in there was just a pretty typical thing to do. That's kind of where spirits lived, was up there, and that's true for lots of cultures, the Egyptians and the Jews. And so I think it's just a natural outgrowth of that. And when they become demonized in the Christian literature, I think that that's just the natural way that Christianity developed, is that basically you either have angels or demons. Yeah, you either have angels or demons, and that's it. And the entities that existed in the space of in the air, well, they had to become demons. So I think that's what's going on. That'd be my guess. That'd be my guess. Yes. Would you consider selling the textbooks that will be studied on the trip to supporters who are not able to go? If I end when and if I end up making when I make the textbook, I'm happy just to give you the textbook. I mean, it's going to be basically a PDF of a bunch of different sources I'll put together in the same way that I would put together for any kind of class I was teaching. So once I get it put together, I'll let people know, and I'll just give you a link to a PDF, and you can just have it. I'm not one to hold on to stuff like that. Knowledge and love are the best things that one can give away. So knowledge and love are the best things that one can give away. So I'm more than happy to give it away. Thank you, Mark. £5 can get a pint. Not in London though. Pints are expensive in London. Shem Jacobs, any thoughts on the Shmita cycle in relation to Ophiuchus? So the Shmita cycle is the cycle of folks where every 7 years the fields are made to lay fallow, and debts are forgiven. I don't have any sort of directly thoughts on this. No, nothing comes to mind exclusively because I don't. Yeah, nothing jumps to mind. I don't even know what Ophiuchus is. It's like it's a astrological thing. It's a constellation. Yeah, I don't have any thoughts on this. I'm sorry. I don't know, but I don't know enough about the constellation, frankly. I mean, I know a good bit about the Shemitah, but I don't know much about specifically this question. But I'll look it up. My apologies. I always feel bad when people send me super stickers or chats and ask me questions that I literally have no idea the answer. I wish there was a way to like instantly refund them, but I cannot do that because I feel like bad taking people's money if I don't know stuff. All right. Yeah, Philip, could the Baal cycle refers to El as the great bull of heaven? That's right. Could the golden calf at Mount Sinai be El? Could Exodus be a battle between El and Yahweh followers? I think what ends up happening is this is what Mark Smith thinks, and this is basically what I think, is that the bull imagery was associated with El, and that insofar as Yahweh becomes assimilated to El, Yahweh gets the bull imagery. And the north, Israel, the kingdom of Israel, as much as they were ever, the north, the kingdom of Israel, they're much more comfortable with that bull imagery, and that bull imagery is something that we know that the Southerners disliked about the North, and I think that the whole golden calf story, at some level, is generated as a polemic against the Northern Yahwists. So, so I think that the golden calf story is a kind of Southern shade thrown on the Northerners, and that's kind of what I think about what's going on with the golden calf story. Let me check the time, folks, because I have 1:55. We have about 15 or 20 more minutes. So have I ever done a video on Plotinus and the Enneads? I've not, and the reason why for that is because there are other great videos on Plotinus and the Enneads. I've done particular episodes about things in the Enneads. So, for instance, I've done an episode on Plotinus's critique of the so-called Gnostics. So I've done that. I may come back and do some other stuff on Plotinus. I might do one on the Ennead on beauty. That's sort of like, in my opinion, if you want to get into what we now call Neoplatonism, I always recommend that the first place you start, the place you start, if you really want to get into Neoplatonism, is the Ennead on beauty. I think it is absolutely the best part of Plotinus's Enneads. If you've never read it, I think it's Ennead 6. So if you've never read it, you're missing out, man. Ennead on beauty is just a fantastic, fantastic text. So that's the most, I think it's the most sublime of the sections of the Ennead. So I might do one on that as a recommendation, like where to begin with Neoplatonism. And I would say that Ennead, I think it's Ennead 6. That's the Ennead on beauty. All right. Gonna get a. Does Christianity even exist without Platonism? Probably not. I mean, I would say that Christianity doesn't exist without Middleplatonism, which is to say the amalgamation of Stoicism and academic philosophy and Platonism. But yeah, I mean, Christianity doesn't get its theological chops together without some version of Middleplatonism. And there's sort of two. I'll save that. I have a thought about this about sort of there's a mythological and theological route that Christianity, in many ways, they had to take both. And the mythological route, when you lean hard into the mythological direction that Christianity had to take, I think you end up with a sort of the very elaborate cosmologies that you find in so-called Gnosticism. But I think that the proto-Orthodoxy or the proto-Catholics went in the direction of theology, which is to say they leaned really hard in the direction of Middle Platonism. And I think that's why someone like Origen and someone like Valentinus look so different from one another, although they're not temporally proximate. But I think that's part of the reason. It's a difference in emphasis, and I think that difference in emphasis really has a that's the reason why they get shaded so differently. But I'm going to work this idea out. It's a bit of a speculative idea, but I'm going to work this idea out later. I mean, if you think about Origen's writing, and he's born in 180 or so, 185. And he's born at literally the same time that Irenaeus is composing against the heresies. And so, but yeah, Origen's really leaning hard into the philosophical direction of things and setting that as a gold standard in many ways for the rest of, and for the rest of Christian history, or at least Western Christian history for sure, Eastern too. All right. Let me grab some other questions just to make sure that it's not just folks who can pay some money. I'll try to get as many questions as I can. Sorry, folks, I'm just scrolling up to see earlier questions. Yeah, doing an episode on Abraxas. Yeah, I think that eventually I'll do an episode on Abraxas. This will be a great combination for Dr. Kristen Switzer and I to do some kind of collab on Abraxas. But yeah, yep, I will end up doing one. That's absolutely the case. Why was the New Testament written in Greek and not Aramaic? Some scholars do believe that some of the New Testament was originally written in Aramaic. Matthew and Mark perhaps have Aramaic antecedents that have been lost. But it was written in Greek because that's what everyone, Christianity within the first couple of generations of it becoming, under its own feet in terms of, especially Pauline Christianity. Christianity was no longer at all interested in preaching exclusively to Jewish people, if it had that interest even within the first few years after Jesus' death. And I think that that if you're going to preach and teach to people that aren't Jews, then you got to get out of Aramaic. You got to get into Greek. And so the Christians quickly pivoted over to Greek as the language by which to spread the good news. Because if you want to spread the good news, the gospel, you're not going to spread it far in Aramaic. And therefore, Greek's your language. Greek is your language. Yes, I have heard of the Shams Ma'arif. I don't have any thoughts about it because I've never read it. There is a partial English translation that I know that has come out recently. I know that Philip Holm has also done an episode on the Shams Ma'arif. But to my knowledge, there is no academic translation of it into English, and there is no complete translation of it into English. So I don't have a lot of thoughts about it, mostly because I haven't read it. I don't really read Arabic very well, and so I'm pretty distantly removed from the text. So I don't have a lot of thoughts on it. I've been wondering at what point Paracelsus and Agrippa became aware of each other. Um, yeah, I mean, they definitely lived at the same time. I don't think there's any evidence that Agrippa and Paracelsus knew one another. I don't know of any reference in Agrippa to Paracelsus, and I haven't checked all of Paracelsus because it's a giant mountain of literature. But to my knowledge, I don't think there's any evidence that they ever knew of each other's existence, and I don't know that they ever. I know that I don't think there's any evidence they ever interacted. This is sort of like we want these famous occultists who live at the same time to interact for some reason. This is true of like John Dee and Giordano Bruno. Like they could have interacted. They lived at the same time. Bruno was in Italy, or Bruno was in England for a while, but there's absolutely no evidence that Bruno and Dee ever interacted. And I think the same thing is true for Paracelsus and Agrippa. I don't think they ever interacted, to my knowledge. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing any evidence that they interacted. Um, if I've ever spoken about my materialism and my views of metaphysics, I've talked a little bit about it here and there. I don't think it's terribly interesting. But yeah, I'm very interested in the concept of mystical mysticism, or mystical mysticism, mystical materialism. Yes, I am interested in the concept of mystical materialism, and yeah, I do have sympathies with a certain read of base materialism and Bataille, and the kind of Christian atheism of Zizek. And I've developed a Jewish version of what I would call post-theism. And so yeah, these are all thoughts I have. They're books that I want to write at some point, but they're going to have to be books that I write when I get time, and I don't have time. But yes, I have thought a lot about mystical materialism, and I think that it is definitely a real thing. And I think, yeah, like you said, Bataille and Zizek are excellent allies to be had in that conversation. I invited Zizek on the channel actually to talk about Gnosticism, but he said he was too tired. He was too tired. It was too difficult a topic. So I did get an email back from Slavoj Zizek, and he said he couldn't do it, but maybe we can bother him. No, we do not bother Slavoj Zizek, but maybe I'll ask him again when he's feeling a little better, and maybe he'll be interested in coming, because I want to talk about Gnosticism and Adorno and occultism and all of it. And of course, give Zizek the floor and you wind him up, and man, he goes. So I wish I could have done that, but no, it was not the case. That Zizek was not up for it. So hopefully at some point he will be, before he goes to the great gulag in the sky. All right. All right. He's got some other questions down here. Yeah, I've heard on a more mystical kind of channel the hypothesis that Jesus was an Essene. There's no evidence that Jesus was an Essene. Well, I should say this. We don't know really a lot about the Essenes. We know what Josephus says about the Essenes. We know a little bit about them from what I think Philo says about them. We have archaeological ruins at Qumran, and we have some sectarian documents recovered from that region. Now, the documents recovered from Qumran never called themselves Essenes. They never used that term. They always refer to themselves simply as the Yachad, the community. And what little we do know about the Essenes, if we can trust it from Josephus, Jesus doesn't really look like one. So I think that it's far better to think of Jesus as a one of several apocalyptic prophets that existed at that time. And I think that he probably did come to believe that he was a messianic candidate. And again, messianic candidate. I don't know if he believed he was the Messiah, but I do think that he probably at some point began to believe that he was potentially a candidate. And I think he wagered and he lost. He rode into Jerusalem, caused a riot, and they strung him up. And I think sadly that's the long and the short of it. But yeah, I don't think of him as an Essene. He doesn't. Nothing about the Essene seems to track to Jesus. Now his cousin John the Baptist is a different story. John the Baptizer looks a bit more like an Essene. And so Jesus might have been Essene adjacent, which shouldn't be surprising because the Essenes, at least if they're witnessed by the documents left at Qumran, like the War Scroll, were apocalyptic. They were a part of the emergent apocalyptic Judaism. And so it would not be surprising if Jesus was Essene adjacent, but he doesn't seem to have been. There's no good evidence that he was an Essene specifically. John Ivan, my man on the absinthe train. Yes, the absinthe is coming. I bottled, or rather, I proofed down 750 bottles worth. Just a couple of weeks ago, we submitted our labels to the feds. As soon as the labels get approved by the feds, then we are able to start bottling and labeling. And once that happens, all we have to do is get distribution, and we're good to go. So we are in the final stages, folks, of getting the absinthe on the market. There'll be 750 bottles to start. I don't know how long those are going to last. We'll see. But yes, the absinthe is coming. We're looking for an October release. I'm going to try to earmark about 100 or 200 bottles just for you fine folks out there that want to order online. The logistics of that are going to be a mess just because alcohol shipping rules are a complete mess. But I do have a prototype bottle downstairs. I think it's pretty good stuff, John. I think you'll like it. Hopefully I'll get a bottle. I'll get a bottle in your hand no matter what. If I have to courier it myself, because you've been a big supporter of the Absinthe Project, and if I have to hire a courier or courier it myself to get a bottle in your hands, you're definitely getting one. But yep, absinthe is coming. Esoterica absinthe is coming in October, folks. Absolutely. Do you know the connection between the cult of Mithras and Christianity? They were both religions, sort of in the competition of religions that existed in the time. Contrary to a bunch of 19th century myths, Christianity is not a ripoff of Mithras. Mithras was not born of a virgin or born on the 25th of December. None of that's true. Mithras seems to have been born from a rock, and we don't know when Mithras was born. So there's a lot of like really bad 19th century nonsense that gets repeated about the cult of Mithras, as if Christianity just like ripped off all the stuff about Mithraism. But they certainly were cross-pollinating, and they were part of the general field of religion at the time. And Mithraeums look a bit perhaps like churches, but again, maybe all those buildings were kind of the same. But at the same time, early Christianity primarily met in homes, not in churches. Churches simply were homes of believers. It wasn't much later until you began to see the rise of the basilica as an independent building. So there is a connection, but I think it's very weak, and I think we should be very careful to stop repeating a bunch of 19th century rumors about how Christianity just ripped off Mithraism. That information has long been put to rest. Yeah, so man, maybe this is a good idea, Timothy. The how to begin on Neoplatonism. Yeah, maybe that's a good episode to do soon. An episode on sort of. So you want to study Neoplatonism? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'll probably have to do that. Thoughts on the connection between Hegel and Jakob Böhme and Kabbalah? Well, this is the Glenn McGee territory. There is a connection. It is direct influence. Hegel admits that he was directly influenced by Jakob Böhme. I think he calls Jakob Böhme the first German philosopher, and definitely he has some Kabbalah mixed in there. He certainly lectures on Kabbalah. Hegel knows Kabbalah. I will say that Professor McGee and I have emailed privately about his book and about bringing him on. Folks, I've made it clear that I have a bit of skepticism about McGee's claim, but I will say that McGee is an expert, and my own skepticism should always be held in check by his profound expertise in the material. And I think he's going to come on the show when we finally get to the episode on Hegel and Hermeticism, which I do want to do. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So it's coming. I just don't know when. But yeah, I want to bring McGee on because I really want to steelman his position, and there's no better person to steel man the position than the man who wrote the book, and such a brilliant scholar. It's a real honor to be real honor to be in conversation with him. All right, just a couple of more questions, and then it's a great question, Stefan. What was the relationship between Johann Weyer and Agrippa? How much Weyer learned from Agrippa, and he was defending him in his book? So I'll be talking about this toward the end of the Agrippa seminar. Johann Weyer was a student of Agrippa's, which is to say he traveled with Agrippa and was learning directly from him. And so he certainly would have known the 3 books of occult philosophy. Agrippa published it a couple years before he died. Weyer knew him before he died. So he'd have known that. It seems like also Agrippa's relative skepticism around witchcraft, Weyer also picked up and really galvanized Weyer. And this is ultimately why he would write De Prestigis on the trickery of demons. And so, yeah, the influence of Agrippa on Johann Weyer is very, very, very strong. I've done an episode on De Prestigis and Johann Weyer in general. And so, yeah, I think that Agrippa is very much there on the page. Has a huge influence on Agrippa or on Weyer. Is anything in the Bible true? Yes. I was a classics major and looking to learn Hebrew and deepen my understanding of Semitic languages. Yeah, if you're a classics major, man, you've already done Greek and Latin, so Hebrew is going to be a walk in the park. Hebrew is so much easier than Greek. Yeah, I recommended earlier that I have a folks can check out my study guide, which is in the pinned comment of every video. In the pinned comment there, I always give you a link to my book list, and the book list also includes some learning resources for picking up Hebrew and Aramaic. Give us the thoughts on the Book of Enoch. Yes, I will eventually start making. I'm going to do a series on the Book of Enoch, because the Book of Enoch is not one book. It's, I don't know, 5 at least, it seems like. And yeah, I'm going to do a series on the Book of Enoch, a deep dive on the Book of Enoch. So look for that. And it's going to be next year, but so I'm not going to cover the Book of Enoch as one episode. I'm going to cover it as a series. So look for the episode on the series. Is there a follow-up episode you'd like to do on Aleister Crowley? Probably not. Where he got the spells on how to contain the demon Choronzon, and how do you know the spells work? I don't know that he was able to contain the demon Choronzon. I think he tried. I think at least when in Algeria, when they were doing the Enochian stuff and Vision of the Voice, yeah, Choronzon really mucked about with what's his name? The Jewish guy. I can't remember the guy he was working with. Can't believe he slipped my mind. At any rate, I think that the Choronzon stuff, it comes out of Enochian material, although in the Enochian material is Choronzom. Crowley spelled it wrong, or the Golden Dawn people spelled it wrong for whatever reason. But I don't know that there were spells to contain him, but I think it was just a magical circle they built, and I think they sacrificed an animal there out in Algeria in the Vision of the Voice, maybe pigeon or something. I forget. But yeah, I think if you want to learn more about that, you should read the Vision of the Voice. It's absolutely one of my favorite texts written by Crowley, or I shouldn't say written. It's one of my favorite Thelemic texts. It's real poetry, real mystical poetry. The Vision of the Voice is extremely fascinating text. So maybe I'll do an episode on the Vision of the Voice, just because of my deep interest in Enochiana. So maybe I'll call up Marco and maybe some other folks and do an episode on the Vision of the Voice. It's a great text. All right, folks, just a couple more. How do we purchase your absinthe in the U.S.? As soon as it comes out, folks, I'll have a link for you. I'll do a little episode about it, and I'll have a link for you. And assuming you can get it shipped to your state, then hopefully you'll be able to get it. So hopefully you'll be able to get access to it. All right. What's my opinion of the Kabbalah Center in LA and Rav Berg's lineage? I think he comes out of the tradition of the Baal Sulam, or Rabbi Yudu Ashlag of blessed memory, if I remember correctly. I don't have a lot of thoughts on the Kabbalah Center. I don't know much about it. I think they have a very interesting kind of religious mandate, and they're interesting in terms of the way they interact with modernity in Kabbalah. But it's not for me, and but it's not for me to also poo on anyone's religious beliefs. People give Madonna a hard time, because she's a Kabbalist, Madonna. I'm like, it's not your place to poo on anyone's religion. It's not your place to poo on anyone's spirituality. Madonna, who is from here in Michigan, Bay City, you know, um, I don't buy that. I really don't appreciate, when people denigrate people's spirituality, whether it's Madonna or anyone else. And I think that, if she found real spiritual goodness in the Kabbalah Center, and insofar as the Kabbalah Center is not a scam, like so many other things, and I think all of LA is a scam, frankly. Um, but so you're really asking me what I think about LA, but insofar as the Kabbalah Center is run reputably and responsibly, and if that is a spirituality that appeals to her, to Madonna or other people, great. Man, the world we are living, folks, in the midst of a terrible meaning famine. Meaning for many people is a very rare commodity. Spirituality is a very rare commodity. Feeling connected, feeling in a community. Loneliness among men, especially, is at epidemic levels. Again, we don't often talk about men's mental health, but mostly because men are stupid about talking about their own mental health. But I can tell you, I experience extreme amounts of loneliness all the time, very frequently. I feel it profoundly, and I think many men do. I think women also have enormous mental health challenges. Of course, trans people and LGBTQ community have enormous mental health challenges as well. And so, yeah, I think that we're living an epidemic of loneliness and disconnectivity and spiritual emptiness. And I think if the Kabbalah Center is providing spiritual services in a responsible way, more power to them. More power to them. How do you defeat the Demiurge? You know about him. Knowledge is power, folks. That's the whole reason why it's called Gnosticism. You realize that the Demiurge is not the god of the world, and then you yeet your soul to the light. Who wrote the Sefer HaRazim? We don't know. We do know that one of the scribes that wrote the Sefer HaRazim is the same scribe that wrote that did the Judeo-Arabic version of Thabit ibn Qurra's on Talismans. So that's interesting. We don't know the date. I think the medieval manuscript, but the manuscripts we have are medieval. But the dating is interesting because there are mentions of horse races, and those horse races seem distinctly Roman. And so we're getting a guess that the text was written sometime during the Roman period. But who wrote it and why? We don't know. We don't know. What's the key differences between talisman and amulets? I mean, generally speaking, an amulet has its power in the kind of substance that it's made from, or because it's been inscribed with something that gives it power. A talisman specifically has power because it has captured astral radiation because of at the moment of its construction. So you time it via astrological election, and when you create it, you cast it. It soaks up all that astral radiation, and it has the power of that specific astral configuration. So a talisman, strictly speaking, has celestial power built into it. Amulets are typically powerful because of their inscription or fumigations, or because of the kind of material they're made from. That's typically the distinction. Your mileage will vary. Yeah, I'd come to Chicago. Not far away from there anyway. I would absolutely come to Chicago. Folks want to make it happen. Modern Hermeticist is in the house, trolling as usual. Thank you. You guys don't know, but this man, Dr. Dan Trail, is doing some awesome work in the background that we are gonna just like lay on you guys pretty soon. He's doing some amazing translation work in the background. We're working together on a project. Big respect for Dan Trail. Just real respect for you, Dan. The man's a real scholar, gentlemen. I really appreciate him. And when's the Bigfoot episode coming? I don't know, Dan. We have to collab on it. We need to collab on the cryptid episode, Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch. We're going to bust in there. And Bohemian Grove, too. Me and Dan, we're going to Bohemian Grove, folks. We're going to expose them. Owl worshippers. Saturn owl worshippers. The time cube will tell us the right time to do it. All right. Yeah, Mike, it's coming, brother. Book of Enoch series. I've already started thinking about it and planning it. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen probably next year. Probably next year. I got a lot on my plate right now, just to be real honest. All right. Yeah, LA is truly a hellmouth. Yeah, I always think of that Tool song about turning LA into, what is it? Something Bay, whatever it is. That Tool song where like God just breaks off LA into the ocean and it becomes whatever Bay or whatever. Yeah. People hate LA. I don't know. Again, I don't have any real opinion about LA. I'm being totally ridiculous. I should be careful about that when I say certain things like that. But it doesn't seem like the kind of place I want to live. All right, folks, I'm going to get a couple more. Then I'm going to wrap up. So I couldn't do an episode on Borges because I just haven't read any Borges really, and I'm not really an expert. But I have done a whole episode on H.P. Lovecraft, so you can go check out the episode on H.P. Lovecraft. The shorter answer is that Lovecraft is very little influenced by esotericism. He really didn't know much about esotericism, to be honest. Yeah, Arizona Bay. That's right. It's a Bill Hicks reference, of course. Bill Hicks of blessed memory, also buried in Mississippi. May the merit of Bill Hicks protect us all. What a genius that we lost so early. What a horrifying pity to have lost Bill Hicks. On that note, folks, on a reference to the great legacy of Bill Hicks, I wish I were as clever and as funny as him. Again, there's the people like Bill Hicks that are real prophets. I will say that he had a prophetic character to him, and I'll stand by that. Bill Hicks is a prophet, so peace be upon him. All right, folks. Think about this Egypt trip. I'm serious. Think about the Egypt trip. Take a look at it. Come to the open house. Sign up for the open house. Even if it's the kind of thing that you think you can't do, but you may want to see about doing it. This will be a trip of a lifetime. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. I may do it once. I may do it once every 5 years, kind of thing. I might do it once every 10 years. I don't know, but I really want to make it happen. I really want to make it happen with the fine folks that support this channel and watch the channel. And I think it will be an absolutely amazing opportunity. And so, yeah, take a look at the episode this week. I'll include the links in the description of this video as soon as I sign off here. And that's it. Again, folks, for all my Americans, you guys enjoy Labor Day. I know there's a lot of working class people out there, workers just in general. Enjoy your day off. Enjoy Labor Day. And that said, we'll come back next week for more content. We're going to be dealing about child sacrifice, Moloch, very cheery topic. You can imagine, as the father of 2 small children, reading about child sacrifice is a bit harrowing, to be honest. So we're going to be doing that. So yeah, we'll come back with Moloch next week. And aside from that, you guys have a great weekend. Have a great Shabbat if you observe. Otherwise, give yourself some time off, and love yourself, love the people around you. And I will see folks next week. And hopefully we'll bust out and go to Egypt together. Until then, folks, see you next week.